Request to reconsider Bill 194 Draft 3 relating to conditions to change of zone from Councilmember Haleko Goro Inaba, dated March 30, 2023, requesting that Bill 194 Draft 3 be placed on the April 19, 2023 Council agenda for reconsideration and a potential override of the Mayor's disapproval, and Bill 194 Draft 3, which amends Chapter 25, Article 2, Division 4, Section 25-2-44 of the Hawaiʻi County Code 1983, 2016 edition as amended relating to conditions on change of zone.
I'm sorry that the mayor could not be here. He is at a doctor's appointment, which he thought would be completed at this point in time, but it's taking an extended amount of time, so he does apologize for that. I will share his message that he wanted to be shared, that first of all, he understands the intent of the county council for what you all are doing, but he also wanted to share these thoughts also, in addition to the communication that was sent to the council. The administration firmly believes that this bill limits the council's flexibility and makes it even more difficult for us to build housing for local families. This bill will add expense, uncertainty, and difficulty to the rezoning process. We are already the most regulated county in the U.S. with too many roadblocks to count. This just adds another roadblock and draws out the process. At the end of the day, Mayor Roth is committed to getting our local families in homes, and that's the reason for the veto. Taking the current process from subject matter experts and placing it into a political body doesn't make sense, particularly as it relates to subtle nuances of zoning and planning. This is about local families and local builders. And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Managing Director Lee Lord. Also today, we have Director Zendo Kern and we have Jean Campbell available if there would be any questions at this time. But thank you for letting me share that for the mayor. I appreciate it.
Well, here we are again with Bill 194. First of all, I want to mahalo those of our community members who are here today who testified live to the overwhelming testimony and support of this bill that we received as well. As we know, Bill 194 essentially adds a level of transparency that we're currently lacking with regards to initial time extensions. This bill allows the council to grant initial time extensions via resolution rather than allowing that authority to continue to lie within the planning director's authority. By doing it this way, we really ensure that the conditions of the initial approval remain intact, that we're not moving goalposts for applicants. The same qualifications for these extensions are going to be used by the council to determine whether or not an extension is granted, with the exception of applicants needing to have to come in prior to the expiration of their ordinance, not 5 years or 3 years after, and them still being granted an extension. Most concerning, I would say, is over the last 40 years, there's no way for the public or for us to know who has been granted initial time extensions by planning directors and for what reasons, and ensuring that those reasons are in line with unforeseen circumstances outside the control of the applicant. And I just want to respond to thoughts just shared by administration. This bill does not limit our ability to condition rezoning ordinances. It doesn't add expense. It doesn't prevent facilities like hospitals, schools, job centers from being created. And it doesn't even remove an opportunity for a midpoint check-in or adjustment of conditions, because the only way that could happen is via a new bill that would amend the original rezoning ordinances. So a lot of these statements simply untrue. And to say that this council has lacks the background or expertise is not only senseless, it's disrespectful in the roles that we serve as county council members. We are the body and the authority at this county to grant change of zones. And it only makes sense for us to reconsider and to look at whether an applicant truly didn't meet their conditions due to circumstances out of their control. So bringing it back, anyone who's already been has already secured a change of zone with that option of a planning director extension still gets that extension and can still exercise that option. Bill 194 is for future rezones, and again, this is really for transparency and accountability, not only on the part of applicants, but on our side as well, and looking at our records and keeping things nice and clean. So really do ask for everyone's support in seeing Bill 194 through. Mahalo.
I wanted to kind of give I have voted no in the past, and I will vote no again. And I wanted to kind of give an extended reason for doing so, given the controversy around it. So I understand the impetus for the bill and the desire to increase transparency by bringing the decision-making about extensions into the public forum of the county council. This is a difficult decision because there are meaningful arguments on both sides of the question. However, on balance, I cannot support this bill because, number one, this bill lessens the tools that are at the disposal of the council in managing land use decision-making and processing. Used carefully and with greater coordination between the planning department and the council, these administrative approvals are an appropriate way to check in on the progress of a project partway through the time allotted. This bill moves towards micromanaging the land use approval process rather than using all of the resources of the administration and civil service knowledge to effectively manage the process. Number two, the bill strays over the boundary between the proper oversight function of the council into direct management of the processes, which is a questionable path to be heading down as a matter of governance practice, in my opinion. Furthermore, there are many who argue that this bill is necessary due to the perception that our current director of planning is unilaterally authorizing extensions. I have not seen any actual evidence of this in the public record, and I don't think that making policy based on personal animus is a sound practice. Number three, this bill increases the uncertainty involved for potential developers of housing projects. This is especially onerous for affordable housing projects that must work within tight budgets and timelines in order to make use of tax credits and other subsidy programs for affordable housing, which we so desperately need, especially here in Kona, where if you come by in the middle of the night, which I did once, there were like 40 or 50 people living in their cars on this very road. So it is my understanding that it can easily take an affordable developer close to 5 years just to get the financing and permitting done for a project, and that is if all goes well. Number four, some in the environmental community would find that the argument that this bill increases uncertainty for developers to be a feature rather than a bug of the bill, and perhaps support the bill precisely because it would slow development on this island. I love open space as much as anybody, but I feel that this is a mistaken position as it creating uncertainty in the development community will disproportionately impact affordable housing development, making that hard for them, making conditions even harder for them, given the skyrocketing prices of materials, insurance, and land. By impeding affordable housing, we are pushing more people out to our sprawling substandard subdivisions, causing more emissions and traffic on the road, and decreasing well-being and affordability on this island. By decreasing the opportunity for young people to start out in life by getting an affordable rental near their job, for instance. Number five, finally, there are other less problematic ways for the council to exercise oversight which have not been explored, such as asking for quarterly or annual reports of project deadlines so that the council and thus the public can stay informed and engaged with project deadlines. So for these reasons, I will vote no on overriding the mayor's veto. Thanks.
Mahalo nui again, Councilmember Inaba, for taking this issue on. I think you know that I have tremendous respect for you and really enjoy working with you. And I appreciate that there are differences of opinion and recognize that at the end of the day, we are all working hard to support and improve our island community. As council members, our charge is legislation and public policy formulation. And so the exactness and precision of our words matter because they direct departments in their work, and it gives community a clear set of guidelines as far as what is expected of them. When Bill 194 was originally introduced, I was in support of the measure. It was simple and would codify an action that council members could already do: amend bills for ordinance, and in this case, remove language related to administrative time extensions for rezoned properties. I want to stress that a bill for ordinance may be amended by the council at any time. This bill in its original form would not have granted council members with a new power. There was and is nothing that prohibits or precludes us from removing administrative time extensions or requiring the applicant to come back to council for an update or to ask for more time. This tool is already in our toolbox. I know this because as planning chair, I work diligently on numerous bills to address council and community concerns for a variety of applications. Both planning commissions, the planning department, and administration agreed with the original language of Bill 194. But then there were multiple amendments made during committee and at council that significantly altered the nature of the bill. These changes highlighted the complexity of the issue at hand, which is really the overall development process and ecosystem, and begs us to answer several questions. If council is granting a rezone, shouldn't it be good in perpetuity? Why are we putting a timer on how long a rezone is good for? And how much time is enough time to complete a project when we think about everything that's required to pull together financing, go through the permitting process, and we think about whose responsibility is to invest in infrastructure, the developer or government? What I appreciated about the original bill was the simplicity and the singular focus. The third and final draft, in my humble opinion, went too far in creating additional layers of bureaucracy. If we want information and transparency, then let's invest in systems that track applications and where they are in the development process. The current process of laws and regulations is already difficult and expensive. This would add to the complexity of getting a project over the finish line and infuse an element of politics into the decision-making process. Frankly, a little deregulation would actually be helpful to ensure more homes are built faster for our residents and at a price point that our residents can afford. As a legislator, I would like for us to continue to be able to refine conditions of approval in relation to rezone requests. Bill 194 Draft 3 would severely hamstring our ability to do so and create an air of uncertainty, making it even harder to get things done here in the islands. With that said, I will be supporting the mayor's veto of this legislation. Thank you, Chair. I yield.
So I support the veto override, and I ask my colleagues to support me in that vote. This is a new beginning for our county and our county's reputation on how difficult and expensive it is to develop property. In fact, I believe this bill will help to identify regulations, external influences, and red tape that create barriers to building housing. Let me point out my reasons for supporting the override. First, those who contacted me to oppose the override argued the council is political, and if this bill passes, it will create more uncertainty. This is not logical when the mayor is an elected official and the planning director is handpicked and reports to the mayor. Either way, an individual or business is dealing with the possibility of changes to conditions for extension or denial of extension by the planning director or the county council. But on the plus side, the requirement to get an extension by resolution of the council is a public process and transparent, something I believe is important to the integrity and reputation of doing business in our county. Second, the council recognizes the work of the Planning Commission and Planning Director when considering and voting on the initial conditions of a change of zone ordinance. This bill we are discussing today is an extension of the initial time. During the hearings on this proposed bill, we discussed the initial time recommended by the planning director. The planning director said his department determines what is a realistic time. This bill is a new beginning. If developers truly believe the initial time condition is unrealistic and fear this bill is another barrier, then we can now use this regulation to inspire us to fix whatever are the barriers to complete the development in the initial time that is determined by the planning department and ensure our county professionals recommend a realistic time to complete conditions for change of zone. Third, our community is demanding we get more housing in the pipeline, housing that helps, for example, local families and our workforce achieve home ownership, and rental housing that provides for our low-income seniors and agricultural workers. This bill is a new beginning, lighting a fire to motivate developers to get the job done, ask for assistance and waivers to achieve the initial time proposed by the planning department and agreed to by the council. We need to stop talking about red tape and barriers. We need to find solutions to improve our business environment. We need to create a culture of can-do. Let us change our course. Bill 194 is the change we need.
I will also be supporting the override. I haven't written out a long thing, but I agree with most of what my council members, colleagues, Councilmember Evans and Inaba have said. For me, the issues are the transparency and the public being able to know what's going on, as well as the county council being able to know what's going on, that we should be setting the original timeframes more accurately. And this whole discussion about uncertainty for developers just, to me, makes it obvious that most of these time extensions are automatically given, and that's why they say they have certainty. Well, then why are we not setting the original timeframes for the accurate length of time? It doesn't make any sense if they're automatically given, and that's why developers have certainty with the current process. So I believe that there should be some uncertainty because it matters why you're asking for another time extension. It shouldn't be automatic. Also interesting that, kind of both sides of this argument are alluding to needing to develop more housing for the island. I think that there are definitely reasons why this could help with developing the kind of housing we want to see get developed, as stated by some of the testifiers today. We want to make sure that our low-income housing is getting developed alongside of other housing that's more profitable for our developers, and that our properties are not being just simply flipped because they've got a time extension that has been granted and therefore seen as a more favorable property, and people making a lot of money on just continually flipping the properties. So I will be voting to override the veto, and thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Kagiwara. Councilmember Villegas.
Wow, what a time, what an era, what a tipping point. We are navigating our way out of a global pandemic where we were in lockdown. Our economy was in a nosedive because of our over-reliance on tourism and external resources. We've lost 25,000 people off the island in that time frame, our workforce. And in the interim, we gained a whole nother socioeconomic component to our community of people. They bought homes, over asking price, sight unseen, for cash. I can't help but see the irony in so many parts of the veto letter that was, I humbly just say was cockamamie about Bill 194, and the constant claims about Bill 194 creating, uncertainty in our housing market. Our housing market is totally uncertain, period, because it's been fundamentally founded upon over-reliance for external resources and homes being built here with the Menini percentage requirement for affordable housing, which is not the precedent in the mainland. Many of the counties that were included in, and I was just looking up the UHERO measuring the burden of housing regulation in Hawaii. I just want to point out the first line in this report is that UHERO briefs are circulated to stimulate discussion and critical comment. The views expressed are those of the individual authors. While briefs benefit from active UHERO discussion, they have not undergone formal academic peer review. So these are opinions of very intelligent people who do an immense amount of research. But as we all know, when you do research, if you're gathering data, you can also present data in a million ways to create a number of different messages. So I feel for myself personally, you know, the irony of the Honolulu Planning Department, all of the federal investigations and people continually getting busted for underhanded, illegal activities is so tragic, both for the administrations within our state and for us who sit in these roles, that makes our positions questionable as our levels of integrity and why and how we serve. But when we talk about restrictive land use environments, hell yes, they are. We live on islands. We have restrictive lands. We do not have millions of acres to then, if they are destroyed, move on to the next area and leave that contamination is and where it is, to the degradation of future generations. We have a finite, precious resource, and it is our responsibility to defend that resource, to place the highest requirements for its use, for the long-term regenerative capacity for our water, for our oceans, for our future generations. And while I appreciate the, you can tell I get passionate about this, for me this comes to, it's not so much about the I's and the T's. I also have to kind of chuckle at the irony of the criticism of the overcomplication of the different versions of Bill 194, when it was my experience sitting there that it was those who now oppose it in its current form who asked for those amendments to begin with. So one of my predecessors used the term smoke and mirrors, and that used to always make me chuckle, especially as I continue in this crazy job. Because uncertainty is a part of life, and it is not our job to remove uncertainty for developers. It's my job and my responsibility to remove as much uncertainty as possible for my constituents, because they're the ones that hired me to sit in this seat, to do this role, and to serve our community. Just one more comment, very short. The testimony received, a written testimony today. There are 82 written testimonies in favor of overriding Bill 194. There are 10 testimonies in opposition of overriding Bill 194. It's our job to represent the people in our districts. And for those reasons, and based on my na'au and my internal sense of right and wrong, and in my opportunity to serve and my legacy that I want to leave in this position of leadership, I will be supporting the override of the mayor's veto. I yield.
You know, I really appreciate everyone's perspective today, and from testimony to council members, I like the makeup of our council right now, because we all have a good perspective and a good background. So the decisions that we've reached so far as a council, I think, have been very fair. Just in looking at the veto, you know, first off, politics is alive and well in both the Hamakua and the Puna side of this building. Let's just say that. We'll start with that. And I voted to approve this bill the first time. I'll be voting again to approve this bill. I will not support the veto by the mayor. In looking at the process, the idea that this will lengthen the process, I mean, that can be true. The addition of, that process being by resolution, in my eyes, means a 2 to 4 week window of getting a resolution in front of the council to amend the original bill. And I mean, we're talking 5, 10 years, 20 years for projects. Even one of our testifiers, 40 years, 60 years for a project. 2 to 4 weeks, that's a month to get something into council, in front of council, and then approved. And I did notice this morning, looking over the bill, it doesn't state how many readings at council. So that means that it could be waived to council, 1 reading. That can be a fairly short process. So given our previous discussion on this, my original standpoint and my vote stays. I'm going to be supporting the bill as written. But I do appreciate everyone's input today and perspective, testimony across the board, the departments, the mayor's office. Thank you. Thank you for the conversation. I yield.
Any additional discussion? Councilmember Leloy.
Like Mr. Kaniali'i Kleinfelder, I really am appreciating all the different perspectives and the lenses, and I think it just lends itself to the complexities of land use and approvals, whether it be in Puna, Hilo, or West Hawaii. Like my other colleague, out the gate, this bill was right on par to where I wanted it to be. But as things began to move forward, it was Mr. Kaniali'i Kleinfelder who reminded me that it had unanimous approval out of both planning commissions, but that was a very different bill at that time. I continue to support kind of the stop the clock because there is so many complexities with land use and approvals that are outside of the applicant's control. If we think our building permit process is long, I would urge my colleagues to look at the need of getting a LOMAR or a CLOMAR from our federal government, along with the Department of Transportation, and then, a signalization to get approved. Those things can really eat up a lot of time in an applicant's time for approving development. So for those reasons, it was good when we started, but it's not where we landed. And for those reasons, I'm going to be voting against Bill 194. Thanks, Chair, for the time. And thank you to my colleagues for all of this robust conversation. I think the viewpoints are alive and well. I yield.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to weigh in myself briefly. I think I share for sure Councilmember Kaniali'i Kleinfelder and Councilmember Leloy's position that this composition of this council right now is really wonderful from the standpoint of how knowledgeable, engaged, just thoughtful everybody is. And I just want to let you know that all of you, that I appreciate you and I appreciate working with you. I've had conversations, first of all, folks on both sides of this veto override, I think, make some really excellent points. In addition, I've had discussions with Director Kern, the mayor, Corporation Council, and first of all, I will state that, first of all, I'm going to support overriding the veto. Let me just be clear about that. But, I think that there are valid concerns from the administration side about the actual language of the bill at this time, as well as some of the concerns that exist from Corporation Council. At the same time, I really appreciate, Councilmember Inaba, what your intention was and what we're trying to provide here, which is opportunity for public input and transparency. To me, that's what the political process is. It is not I don't like politics being used as a bad word, and I do take exception to that in the mayor's veto message. And I'll just say he did apologize to me directly for that language. I will say that. So, I'm going to support the veto override for a particular reason, and it's procedural. I think this bill is imperfect, and I think it needs a little bit more work. I think that the concerns of the administration as well as the intention of the author can both be met with a little more tweaking. However, an up or down vote, if we were to vote against the override today, would be equivalent to voting down this measure. And the council's rules prohibit us from taking up a substantially similar measure in the same term. In other words, if we were to support the override today, this bill would fail, and we would not have the opportunity to further amend it in this term. And so for that reason, I'm going to support overriding the veto so that this can go through. And I'm committing right now to have further discussions with the author and the planning department and the administration to try to get us to somewhere that's a little closer to what we're all hoping for. I don't think the objectives of the administration and the objectives of this body are so dissimilar that we can't come to some sort of middle road compromise. And I hope that's clear to everyone. Something for those who plan on voting against the override today to consider is that we can come back and amend this, but only if we do override the veto. I have also shared this with the mayor. He's aware of that decision as well today. So that's where I land with this. And appreciate everybody's thoughtfulness and deliberation on this bill. At this time, I will ask the clerk for a roll call vote, please.
On the motion to pass Bill 194 Draft 3 upon reconsideration and override the mayor's veto, Ms. Evans. Ms.
Please use
Galimba.
your mic.
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
mic on. Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Galimba.
No.
Mr. Inaba.
Aye.
Ms. Kagiwara.
Aye.
Mr. Kane Kleinfelder.
Aye.
Ms. Kirkowitz.
No.
Ms. Leloy.
No.
Ms. Villegas.
Aye.
Madam Chair.
Aye.
Madam Chair, you have 6 votes in favor with Ms. Galimba, Ms. Kirkowitz, and Ms. Leloy voting in opposition. The mayor's veto is overridden and Bill 194 Draft 3 is an ordinance taking effect today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk.